In the harsh winter of 1952, Joseph Apache Joe Yazzie, a 68-year-old Navajo veteran struggling with poverty and the loss of his family, discovers a weathered notice at the general store advertising a cliff cabin for just 50 cents. The seller, a nervous man named Thomas Hartley, bets to rid himself of the property, warning it's cursed and isolated. Despite his meager savings, Apache sees this as his last chance for shelter before winter claims him. What he doesn't know is that the cabin holds the decades-old secret of a Japanese-American family who was forced into internment during World War II, leaving behind something that will not only change Apache's life, but heal wounds he never knew could mend. The old man's weathered hands trembled as he counted the coins for the third time, 47 cents. Joseph Apache Joe Yazzie stood in the biting November wind outside Murphy's General Store in Flagstaff, Arizona, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. 3 cents short of salvation, 3 cents short of death. At 68, with nowhere to sleep but the alcove behind the abandoned railway station, he knew this winter would be his last if he didn't find shelter soon. That's when he saw it. A yellowed piece of paper, barely clinging to the store's bulletin board, its edges curled from moisture and time. Cliff cabin for sale, 50 cents, inquire with Hartley. Serious buyers only, as is. Apache Joe squinted at the notice, his vision not what it used to be. 50 cents for a cabin. Even in 1952, that was absurd. There had to be something terribly wrong with it. But as another gust of wind cut through his threadbare army jacket, the same one he'd worn in France during the Great War, he realized he didn't have the luxury of being picky. He pushed open the door to Murphy's, the bell above chiming weakly. The warmth hit him immediately, making his joints ache with the sudden change. Behind the counter, Ed Murphy looked up from his ledger, his expression shifting from neutral to guarded when he recognized Apache. "Joe," Ed said curtly, "told you yesterday, no more credit." "Not asking for credit," Apache replied, his voice hoarse from the cold. He pointed toward the window. "That notice about the cabin. Where do I find this Hartley?" Ed's eyebrows rose. "You want to buy the Hartley place?" "Joe, that cabin's been abandoned for near a decade. Thomas Hartley inherited it from his uncle, but won't nobody go near it. Says it's cursed. Cursed houses don't bother men who've already been cursed." Apache said quietly. Ed studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Hartley works at the lumber yard, south side of town. But Joe, I'm telling you, there's something not right about that place. It's way up on Skeleton Ridge, barely a goat path to reach it. No water, no electricity. And the stories. Stories? Lights at night when nobody's there. Sounds. The Mexicans working the rail line say they've heard crying coming from up pet. A woman's voice, sometimes a child." Apache Joe almost smiled. "Ed, I've heard the cries of dying men in trenches filled with mud and blood. I've heard my own children call for me in dreams I can't wake from. Whatever's in that cabin, it can't be worse than what's already in my head." Ed looked uncomfortable, then scribbled something on a piece of paper. "Hartley's address. Don't say I didn't warn you." The walk to the lumber yard took Apache Joe nearly an hour, his arthritic hip protesting with each step. The temperature continued to drop, and he could smell snow in the air. By the time he found Thomas Hartley, a thin, nervous man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair, Apache's fingers were numb. "You want to buy the cabin?" Hartley asked incredulously, looking Apache up and down. "You Indian?" "Navajo," Apache said simply. "Well, I suppose. I mean, if you've got the 50 cents. Hartley fumbled in his pocket for a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. "Look, I'll be straight with you. That cabin's been nothing but trouble for my family. My uncle bought it cheap from the government after the war. Some Japanese family owned it before. Got sent to those camps, you know. Never came back for it." Apache's jaw tightened. He knew about people being forced from their homes. His own people had walked the long walk of the Navajo less than a century ago. "The 50 cents, Apache said, pulling out his coins. "I have 47. But I can work for the other 3. Chop wood, maybe." Hartley stared at the coins in Apache's outstretched palm, then at the old man's face, deeply lined, proud despite everything, eyes that had seen too much. 47's fine, Hartley said suddenly, as if eager to be rid of the burden. I just want it gone. I'll get the deed. As Hartley hurried into the lumberyard's office, Apache Joe stood in the gathering dusk, wondering what desperation would make a man practically give away a property. When Hartley returned with a yellow deed and a rusty key, his words came in a rush. It's about 3 miles up the old mining road, then another mile up the trail to Skeleton Ridge. You'll see it, built right into the cliff face. Stone and timber construction. There's a well, but I don't know if it's good anymore. Haven't been up there in 5 years. Why? Apache asked, taking the key. It was heavy, old-fashioned, with an unusual design on the handle, looked almost like a cherry blossom. Because of what I found last time, Hartley said quietly. Or rather, what found me. Look, you seem like you've had a hard run, so I'll tell you what my uncle told me before he died. He said the family that lived there, the Yamadas, they left something behind, something important. He went looking for it once, tore up floorboards and everything, but never found nothing. Drove him half mad toward the end, swearing he could hear them calling for it. Calling for what? Don't know. He died before he could say. Heart attack, middle of the night, screaming about voices in the walls. Hartley handed over the deed. It's yours now, God help you. Apache Joe folded the deed carefully and placed it in his inner pocket, next to the photograph he always carried. His wife, Maria, and their 2 children, taken before the influenza epidemic of 1933, that left him alone. The journey to the cabin took the rest of the day. The mining road was overgrown, barely visible in places, and the trail up to Skeleton Ridge was indeed more suited for goats than men. Apache had to stop frequently to rest, his breathing labored in the thin mountain air. As the sun began to set, painting the red rocks in shades of gold and purple, he finally saw it. The cabin was built into a natural cave formation in the cliff face, its front wall constructed of fitted stones with timber framing. It was larger than he'd expected, maybe 3 rooms from what he could see. The windows were intact but dirty, and the door hung slightly askew on its hinges. Despite its abandonment, there was something beautiful about it, the way it seemed to grow from the cliff itself, as if it had always been there. Apache Joe stood at the threshold, key in hand as the last light faded from the sky. The wind had picked up, whistling through the rocks with an almost musical quality. Or was that actual music? He paused, listening. For a moment, he could swear he heard it, a woman's voice singing a lullaby in a language he didn't understand. He inserted the key and turned it. The lock protested, but gave way, and the door swung open with a long, mournful creak. The smell hit him immediately. Must, decay, and something else. Something floral, like cherry blossoms, which made no sense at this altitude in this season. Apache Joe stepped inside, and immediately his foot went through a rotten floorboard. As he pulled it free, cursing, something caught his eye in the gap, a piece of fabric, faded purple with a pattern of white cranes. He reached down and pulled it free. It was a child's kimono, perfectly preserved, despite the years. That's when he heard it clearly, a woman's voice, soft and sad, singing in Japanese, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the wall. Apache Joe Yazzie, who had faced German machine guns and survived the loss of everything he loved, felt his knees weaken. He sat down heavily on the dusty floor, still clutching the tiny kimono, and for the first time in 19 years, he wept. The morning sun filtering through the grimy windows woke Apache Joe from where he'd fallen asleep on the floor. The child's kimono still clutched in his weathered hands. His back screamed in protest as he sat up, every joint stiff from the cold night spent on bare wooden boards. But he was alive, and for the first time in months, he'd slept without dreaming of trenches or empty houses. The cabin, in daylight, revealed itself more fully. The main room was larger than he'd thought, with a stone fireplace built into the cliff wall itself. Furniture remained: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a rocking chair near the window, all covered in thick dust, but surprisingly intact. Japanese characters were carved into the table's edge, delicate and precise. Apache Joe stood slowly, his hip protesting, and began to explore. The floorboard he'd broken through the night before revealed a small cavity beneath, and he knelt carefully to examine it. More items were hidden there: a wooden box containing what looked like letters, all in Japanese, a small cloth doll with a painted face, and a leather journal, water-damaged but readable, written in English. He opened the journal carefully. The first entry was dated March 15th, 1942. "They came today, Executive Order 9066, they said. We have 48 hours to pack what we can carry. Everything else must be left behind. My husband Kenji says we will return soon, that this is temporary, but I see the fear in his eyes. Our daughter Lily doesn't understand why she can't bring her piano. She's only 7. How do I explain that being American isn't enough when you have a Japanese face?" Apache Joe's throat tightened. He knew this pain intimately. The pain of being told your home was no longer yours, that your very existence was somehow wrong. He continued reading. March 17, 1942. "Last day. Kenji has hidden our family treasures in the walls and beneath the floors. They'll be safe here, he says. The mountain will protect them until we return. But I know better. I've seen how they look at us. We won't be coming back. I've left my mother's music box in the wall behind the fireplace. When the wind blows through just right, it plays on its own. Maybe it will remember us when everyone else forgets." Apache set the journal aside and approached the fireplace. Running his hands along the stones, he found one that seemed loose. With some effort, he worked it free, revealing a cavity behind. Inside was an ornate music box, its lacquered surface decorated with cherry blossoms and mountains. He wound the key on its bottom, and a hauntingly beautiful melody filled the cabin. The same tune he'd heard the night before, he realized. Not a ghost, but the wind activating the mechanism through some crack in the wall. Or was it? As the melody played, Apache could swear he heard something else, footsteps above him, in what must be an upper room he hadn't noticed. The cabin was built into the cliff, at multiple levels, he realized. A narrow staircase, almost hidden behind a faded curtain, led upward. Despite his protesting joints, Apache climbed. The stairs were carved directly into the rock, worn smooth by years of use. At the top was a small room, barely more than an alcove, with a single window looking out over the vast canyon below. And there, in the corner, sat a piano. It was a small upright, its wood warped and keys yellowed, but intact. Sheet music still sat on the stand. Sakura, Sakura, with handwritten notes in the margins. Lily's recital piece, Spring, 1942. She never got to perform it. Apache touched one of the keys gently. The note rang out, surprisingly clear despite the piano's condition. As if in response, a wind chime he hadn't noticed before began to sing outside the window. But there was no wind. That's when he saw her, just for a moment, in the reflection of the window glass. A young girl in a school dress, her hair in pigtails, sitting at the piano. Apache spun around, but the room was empty. When he looked back at the window, she was gone. His heart was racing, but strangely, he felt no fear. The presence, if that's what it was, didn't feel malevolent. It felt sad, lonely, like an echo of something that had once been full of life. Apache made his way back downstairs and continued exploring. Behind the main room was a kitchen with a hand-pump water, probably drawing from the well Hartley had mentioned. He pumped the handle several times, and after some groaning and sputtering, brown water emerged, then gradually cleared. At least he'd have water. The third room was a bedroom, simple but comfortable. The bed frame remained, though the mattress had long since rotted away. But in the closet, wrapped in oilcloth, he found bedding that had been protected from the elements. As he pulled it out, photographs scattered across the floor. He gathered them carefully, studying each one. The Yamada family came to life before his eyes. Kenji, a serious-looking man with kind eyes, his wife Mariko, beautiful and serene, and Lily grinning gap-toothed at the camera, her arms around a spotted dog. There were photos of gatherings, celebrations, everyday moments of a life interrupted. One photo in particular stopped him cold. It showed Lily standing next to an elderly Native American woman, both of them smiling. The woman wore traditional dress, and Apache recognized the patterns. She was Hopi from one of the pueblos not far from here. On the back, someone had written Lily and grandmother Ayana, who taught her the old songs. 1941. The old songs, Apache knew about those. Songs that connected the earth to the sky, the living to the gone, the present to the eternal. This grandmother Ayana had shared something sacred with this Japanese girl, had seen past the surface to something deeper. As the day wore on, Apache Joe found himself settling into the cabin. He cleaned as best he could, fixed the door's hinges with tools he found in a storage box, and even managed to get a fire going in the fireplace with wood from a pile outside that had been protected by an overhang. As darkness fell and the fire crackled, he sat in the rocking chair with Mariko's journal, reading by firelight. April 12th, 1942, Manzanar Camp. They've put us in horse stalls. The smell is overwhelming. Lily cries every night for her piano, for her dog Patch, who we had to leave with the neighbors. Kenji tries to stay strong, but I see him breaking. We are American citizens. He fought in the Great War. But none of that matters now. Apache's own memories surfaced, returning from France in 1919, decorated for bravery, only to be told he couldn't vote in the country he'd almost died for. Wasn't even considered a citizen until 1924. The parallels were too painful, too familiar. December 1942. The dust storms here are terrible, and her lungs were always weak. The camp doctor does what he can, but supplies are limited. She keeps asking if we can go home for Christmas, if she can play her recital piece for the camp. I tell her yes, lying through my teeth, because what else can a mother do? The entries became more sporadic after that, shorter, filled with growing desperation. The last entry was dated February 14, 1943. Lily passed this morning. The sunrise was beautiful through the dust, and she said it looked like the view from our cabin. Can you hear it, Mama? She asked. The mountain is singing. Then she was gone. Kenji hasn't spoken since. I don't think we'll ever go home now. How can we face those rooms without her laughter? But I pray someone finds what we left behind. Someone who understands loss. Someone who will know what to do with the love we built into those walls. Apache Joe closed the journal, tears streaming down his weathered face. Above him, he heard the piano again. Just a few notes. Tentative, like a child practicing. The wind chimes sang along, and the fire crackled in harmony. The cabin was alive with memory, with love that refused to die even when the ones who created it were gone. He stood and climbed the stairs again to the piano room. This time he sat on the bench and placed his gnarled fingers on the keys. He didn't know how to play, had never learned, but his hands seemed to move on their own, picking out a simple melody, one his grandmother had hummed while weaving, an old Navajo tune about the spirits that lived in the mountains. As he played, badly but with feeling, he could swear he felt small hands guiding his, showing him where to place his fingers. The melody grew stronger, more confident, blending the Navajo tune with something that sounded Japanese, creating something entirely new. That's when he heard it clearly, not a ghost, not the wind, but something else. Laughter, a child's pure, delighted laughter, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And for the first time in 19 years, Apache Joe smiled. "Hello, Lily," he whispered to the empty room that suddenly didn't feel empty at all. "My name is Joseph. I think your mother sent me here. I think we're both supposed to be home." The first snow came 3 days later, transforming the harsh landscape into something softer, almost forgiving. Apache Joe had spent those days making the cabin livable, patching the worst of the gaps with mud and straw, cleaning years of dust and decay, and exploring every corner of his strange new home. But it was on this morning, with the world muffled in white, that he found the hidden room. He'd been trying to repair a section of wall where the stones had shifted, probably from years of freeze and thaw, when his hand went straight through what looked like solid rock. It was an illusion, a carefully constructed false wall made to look like natural cliff face. Behind it was a narrow passage. Apache had to turn sideways to squeeze through, his broad shoulders scraping against stone. The passage opened into a cave room, naturally formed but clearly used by the Yamadas. And what he found there made him sink to his knees. The room was a shrine not just to Japanese ancestry, but to something universal. Photographs covered one wall, Kenji in his American military uniform from World War I, standing proud beside other soldiers. Another showed him shaking hands with what appeared to be Native American veterans. Apache recognized the insignia of the code talkers from his own service. There were certificates of commendation, an American flag folded in a triangle, and Kenji's medals, including a Purple Heart. But what truly stopped Apache's breath was the centerpiece, a beautiful silk painting showing a mountain that looked exactly like the view from the cabin, but rendered in Japanese style. At its base, cherry blossoms bloomed beside desert cacti, an impossible marriage of two worlds. And at the bottom, in careful English script, "Where East meets West, we found home." The Yamada family, 1935–1942. Beneath the painting sat a large wooden chest, locked but with the key hanging beside it on a silk cord. Apache's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, wrapped in rice paper, were treasures beyond imagining, not gold or jewels, but something far more precious. There were Lily's report cards, all A's with teacher comments like a joy to have in class, and Bridges cultures beautifully with her kindness. Her drawings, showing the cabin, her family, her dog Patch, and always the old Hopi woman, grandmother Ayana. There were recipes in Mariko's hand, mixing Japanese and local ingredients. Desert sage miso soup, prickly pear mochi, Navajo-style sushi rolls with cornmeal. Deeper in the chest, Apache found something that made him gasp, a photograph of his own grandmother. He held it with shaking hands, barely believing what he was seeing. There she was, standing crane, wearing her finest turquoise jewelry, standing beside grandmother Ayana and young Lily. On the back, in a child's careful printing, "My two grandmothers teaching me to sing to the mountain. They said all mountains hear the same songs, whether you sing in Navajo, Hopi, or Japanese." Apache's mind reeled. His grandmother had died in 1940, when he was away trying to find work in California. He'd never forgiven himself for not being there. But here was evidence that in her final years, she'd been part of something beautiful, this unlikely family that had formed in defiance of all the barriers society tried to erect. There was a letter beneath the photograph, addressed simply to "Who finds this?" Apache opened it with careful fingers. "If you are reading this, then we never returned. I pray you are someone who needs this home as much as it needed us. This cabin has been a refuge for wanderers since before we arrived. The Hopi say it sits on a sacred spot where the earth's heartbeat can be heard. Standing Crane, our Navajo friend, said it's where lost souls come to be found. We leave everything to you, stranger, who is no stranger. But we ask one thing: remember us. Not with sadness, but with joy. Play music in these rooms. Cook food that fills the air with warmth. Let laughter echo off these walls again. In the chest, beneath everything else, you'll find what Lily called her greatest treasure. Please, use it as she would have wanted." With hope, Kenji Yamada. Apache reached to the very bottom of the chest. His fingers found a small silk pouch. Inside was a roll of bills, nearly $300, and a note in a child's handwriting. "My piano fund. I was saving to buy a grand piano like Mrs. Henderson has at the church. But Daddy says we have to leave. I'm hiding this for when we come back. If we don't come back, please give it to someone who needs music in their life. Music makes everything better. Lily Yamada, age 7, $300. A fortune for a 7-year-old girl, enough to live on for months, maybe a year if he was careful. But as he held those bills, saved penny by a little girl who would never play her grand piano, Apache felt something break inside him, not into pieces, but open, like a seed that had been dormant finally receiving water. He carefully returned everything to the chest, except the money and the photograph of his grandmother. These he carried back through the passage to the main room. The fire had died while he was exploring, and the cabin was cold, but Apache didn't immediately rebuild it. Instead, he climbed the stairs to Lily's piano room. The snow had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the window, making the dust motes dance like spirits. Apache sat at the piano and placed Lily's money on the music stand, next to Sakura. Then he did something he hadn't done since his children died. He spoke to the dead as if they could hear him. "Lily," he said, his voice rough with disuse and emotion, "I'm going to tell you something about your grandmother, Standing Crane. My grandmother, she believed that every kindness creates a circle that eventually comes back to where it started. She used to say that we're all threads in the same blanket, and pulling one thread moves all the others." He touched one of the piano keys gently. "You saved this money for music. Your parents hid it for someone who would need it. And here I am, an old Navajo who thought he'd come here to die, finding instead a reason to live. The circle is complete." As if in response, a wind chime he hadn't noticed before, hanging inside the room near the window, began to sing, despite the still air. And then Apache heard something that should have frightened him, but didn't: footsteps in the main room below. Clear, deliberate footsteps. He descended the stairs slowly, his hand on the wall for support. In the main room, the rocking chair was moving gently, as if someone had just risen from it. On the table sat something that hadn't been there before, a cup, still steaming, filled with tea. The smell was unfamiliar but comforting, green tea mixed with some local herb he couldn't identify. Apache approached the table cautiously. Beside the cup was a piece of paper, yellowed with age, that he was certain hadn't been there when he'd left. It was covered in Japanese characters, but at the bottom in English, someone had written, "Welcome home." He picked up the cup with trembling hands. It was warm, real, solid. The tea tasted of earth and growing things, of patience and time. As he drank, Apache felt a presence not frightening but welcoming. The cabin itself seemed to sigh and settle, like a house that had been holding its breath, finally exhaling. That night, Apache Joe used some of Lily's money to walk back to town through the snow. At Murphy's General Store, Ed Murphy's eyes widened when Apache placed orders for supplies: flour, beans, rice, salt, and peculiarly green tea and miso paste. If he could get it from the Japanese grocer in Flagstaff. "Come into some money, Joe?" Ed asked, suspicious. "Come into something better," Apache replied. "A purpose." He also stopped at the lumber yard. Thomas Hartley nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw him. You're still alive," Hartley stammered. "Why wouldn't I be?" "The cabin," the voice, "my uncle said." "Your uncle was right," Apache said calmly. "There are voices, but they're not angry voices, Mr. Hartley. They're sad, they're lonely. They just want someone to remember them with love instead of fear." Hartley stared at him as if he'd gone mad. "You've seen them, the ghosts." "There are no ghosts," Apache said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Just memories so strong they've soaked into the wood and stone. That family, the Yamadas, they loved that place. Love that's strong doesn't just disappear. It waits. Waits for what? For someone who understands loss. Someone who can help complete what was left unfinished." Apache left Hartley standing there, mouth agape, and made one more stop. The town had a small library run by Miss Adelaide Brennan, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd been one of the few people in town to treat Apache with consistent kindness. "Joseph," she exclaimed when he walked in, "I heard you disappeared. Some fool rumor about you buying the Hartley cabin. Not a rumor, Apache said. Miss Adelaide, I need your help. I need to find someone, a family. Japanese family named Yamada. They were sent to the camps in 42. Her expression softened. Oh, Joseph, I remember them. Sweet family. That little girl used to come in here every Saturday, read everything she could get her hands on, smart as a whip. She paused. You know she died in the camps. I know, but the parents, Kenji and Mariko. Mrs. Adelaide moved to a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder marked internment correspondence. I tried to keep track of our Japanese families. It was wrong. What happened? Kenji Yamada. Here it is. Released from Manzanar in 1945. Last known address. Oh my. Joseph. They're in Denver. Kenji works at a plant nursery. Mariko teaches Japanese to diplomats' children. She wrote down the address and handed it to him. Are you going to contact them? They need to know their home is being cared for, Apache said. They need to know Lily's music is still being played. That night, back in the cabin with supplies to last him weeks, Apache Joe sat at the table and began to write a letter by lamplight. As he wrote, the wind chimes sang throughout the house. He'd counted 7 of them now, all singing in harmony despite the still air. The rocking chair creaked gently, and somewhere above, a few piano notes drifted down like snow. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Yamada, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Joseph Yazzie, though most call me Apache Joe. I am the new caretaker of your cabin on Skeleton Ridge. I want you to know it's safe, it's loved, and it's waiting for you if you ever want to return. 2 weeks passed before Apache Joe finally finished the letter. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because every time he tried to write about what he'd found, something would happen. A photograph would fall from somewhere he'd already searched, revealing a new memory. A drawer would stick, then suddenly open, showing hidden letters. Wind would blow through cracks in ways that made the house sing songs he'd never heard, but somehow recognized. It was as if the cabin wanted to make sure he knew the whole story before he told it to others. On the 13th night, during a fierce blizzard that trapped him inside, Apache made his most significant discovery. The storm was so violent that the whole cabin shook, and a section of plaster in the bedroom wall cracked and fell away. Behind it was a metal box, and inside that box was everything. Legal documents showing that Kenji had served not just in World War I, but had been part of a special unit that worked alongside Native American code talkers, learning to use Navajo and Japanese together as an unbreakable code. Commendations from generals. A personal letter from President Wilson thanking him for his service, and at the bottom, a photograph that made Apache's heart stop. It was his younger self, standing next to Kenji Yamada in France. Apache stared at the photograph, memory flooding back like water through a broken dam. Yes, he remembered now. Kenny, they'd called him. The Japanese-American soldier who'd saved Apache's life during the Meager offensive, pulling him from a collapsed trench while under heavy fire. They'd lost touch after the war, as soldiers do, each returning to their own struggles. Apache had never known Kenny's last name was Yamada, never knew he'd ended up in Arizona. The storm raged harder, and Apache could swear he heard voices in the wind, not scary but urgent, insistent. He climbed to the piano room where the sound was strongest. The window had blown open, snow swirling in, and the sheet music for Sakura Sakura was dancing around the room like white butterflies. But one piece of paper remained on the piano stand, held down by an invisible weight. Blank sheet music, with a pencil beside it. Apache understood. He sat at the piano, pencil in hand, and began to write. Not music. He didn't know how to write music, but words. A song poem, the way his grandmother had taught him, where words become music when spoken with the right rhythm. Mountain holds the memory of cherry trees that never grew, of desert flowers and morning snow, of songs in 3 languages, all of them true. Lily dances in the echo, where the cliff meets the sky. Her piano plays the rainfall. Her laughter is the hawk's cry. Kenny Kenji warrior twice over, fighting for a country that forgot his face. Mariko with her picture poems, making beauty in a bitter place. And I, Joseph, walking crow's son. Come here die, but learn to live in the walls that hold your stories, in the love you had to give. As he wrote the last line, the storm suddenly stopped. Complete silence fell over the mountain, the kind of silence that feels alive, expectant. Apache looked up from the paper to find the room transformed. Every surface was covered with origami cranes, hundreds of them, made from what looked like the scattered sheet music, though he'd seen no one make them. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, now streaming through the window. In Japanese tradition, his grandmother had once told him why she knew this. He never asked. 1,000 paper cranes could grant a wish. There weren't quite 1,000 here, but there were many, and in the center of them all, on the piano keys, sat a real crane, impossible at this altitude, in this season pure white, with a red crown. It looked at Apache with ancient eyes, nodded once, then flew out the window into the impossible calm of the night. Apache knew it was time to finish the letter. He went downstairs where the fire had somehow seemed burning despite no one tending it, and began to write with new urgency. Mr. and Mrs. Yamada, I must tell you something that will sound impossible, but I swear on my grandmother's grave and my children's memory that it is true. Your daughter Lily is here, not as a ghost, not as something frightening, but as a presence of pure love that has kept this cabin alive and waiting for resolution. I knew your husband as Kenny in France, 1918. He saved my life in the Argonne forest. I never got to thank him properly. Now I understand why I was led here, not just to find shelter, but to repay a debt and complete a circle that began in the mud of a foreign war. Your belongings are safe. Your memories are preserved. The $300 Lily saved for her piano is here, untouched. But more than things, the love you built into these walls has survived. It has been my honor to be its guardian. I am not a young man. I have little time left. But I make you this promise. I will keep your home ready for you. I will play music in these rooms, even bad. I will tend the memory of your daughter until you can tend it yourselves. But you must come, not to stay if you don't wish to, but to see, to know, to complete what was broken. Lily cannot rest until she knows you've forgiven yourselves for surviving when she didn't. She cannot move on until you take back the joy that was stolen from you. I know what it is to lose children. I know the guilt of being the one who lives. But I also know now, thanks to your daughter's spirit, that love doesn't end with death. It waits, it persists, it finds ways to heal even the deepest wounds. Please come. Come in spring when the desert blooms. Come when the wind chimes sing without wind and the piano plays without hands. Come and take back what was always yours, not just property, but the peace that was taken from you. Your friend across time, Joseph Yazzie, Apache Joe, the soldier Kenny saved, now trying to return the favor. Apache folded the letter, addressed it carefully, and placed it on the table to mail when the weather cleared. As he did, he heard it again. Lily's laughter, clear as spring water, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Adult voices, speaking in Japanese, soft and wondering. And then, in accented English, a man's voice, Joe. Apache Joe from the... Apache turned, and for just a moment, translucent as morning mist, he saw them, Kenji in his doughboy uniform, Mariko in a simple dress, and between them, Lily in her school clothes, all holding hands. They were smiling, crying, bowing deeply in gratitude. Thank you, Kenji's spirit whispered. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for caring. We couldn't leave her alone here. Now we can all rest. Not yet, Apache said firmly, surprising himself with his conviction. Not until your living selves come home. You fought for this country, Kenny. You died for it in different ways. You deserve to reclaim what was taken. Don't go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. but rage with purpose. Help me bring them home. The spirits flickered, solidified slightly, and Lily stepped forward. She reached out her small, ghostly hand and placed it over Apache's heart. He felt warmth spread through his chest, his lungs clearing, his heart beating stronger than it had in years. "We'll wait together," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "You'll help them heal and we'll help you live." "Is that a deal, Grandfather Apache?" "Grandfather." The word broke him and rebuilt him in the same instant. "Yes, little one, that's a deal." The spirits faded, but didn't disappear entirely. Instead, they became part of the cabin's atmosphere, sometimes visible in reflections, always present in the warmth that defied winter, in the tea that appeared when Apache was tired, in the blanket that covered him when he fell asleep reading, in the piano that played lullabies when nightmares of war threatened his sleep. The next morning, the storm had left 4 feet of snow, making the trip to town impossible. But Apache didn't mind. He had work to do, using tools he found in a storage area he hadn't noticed before, or perhaps that hadn't existed before. He began to repair and restore the cabin properly. Every board he replaced, every stone he reset, he did with intention, with ceremony, the way his grandmother had taught him to build things that were meant to last. Days blended into weeks. Apache learned to play simple tunes on the piano. Guided by invisible hands, he cooked meals using Mariko's recipes, adapting them with ingredients he had. He read Kenji's war journals, finding parallels to his own experience that made him weep and laugh in equal measure. And always, always he felt them near, his unexpected family of spirits, waiting with him for the healing that must come. One evening as he was practicing Sakura Sakura with increasing competence, he heard something different. A car engine struggling up the mountain road. It was too early for his letter to have reached Denver and brought a response. He looked out the window to see a truck sliding and grinding through the snow, determined despite the dangerous conditions. Apache went to the door, ready to help whoever had been foolish enough to attempt the climb. But when the truck door opened and a man stepped out, Apache's knees nearly buckled. It was Kenji Yamada, older, grayer, worn by years of sorrow, but unmistakably him. And beside him, helping him through the snow, was Mariko, her face lined but still holding that serene beauty Apache had seen in the photographs. They hadn't received his letter. They had simply come, drawn by something they couldn't explain, on the anniversary of the day they'd been forced to leave 11 years ago. Apache opened the door wide, and as he did, every wind chime in the house burst into song. The piano played a chord of pure joy, and the smell of cherry blossoms, impossible, magical, absolutely real, filled the winter air. "Kenny," Apache said, his voice breaking, "welcome home, soldier." Kenji Yamada looked at the old Navajo man standing in his family's doorway, and recognition dawned like sunrise over the desert. "Joe? Apache Joe? My God, you're alive, you're here. How?" "It's a long story," Apache said, stepping aside to let them in. "But we have time. We have all the time in the world. Your daughter made sure of that." Mariko Yamada stood frozen in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The cabin looked exactly as they'd left it, yet different, alive somehow, warm with candlelight and the smell of miso soup simmering on the stove. But it was the walls that made her sob, covered now with Lily's drawings, carefully framed and hung, her photographs displayed with honor, her childhood paintings treated like the treasures they were. "You preserved everything," she whispered in accented English. "How did you?" "I didn't," Apache said gently. "Your daughter did. She's been the guardian of this place, keeping it ready for your return." Kenji's face went pale. "Our daughter is dead, Mr. Yazzie. She died in Manzanar in 1943. "I know," Apache said, "but the dead don't always leave, especially when love keeps them tethered. Come, sit. Let me serve you tea in your own home, and I'll tell you everything." The Yamadas moved like sleepwalkers through the familiar space. Mariko's fingers traced the table where she'd served countless meals, while Kenji stood before the fireplace, staring at the family photograph Apache had placed on the mantel, the one of all 3 of them from Christmas 1941. their last Christmas together. Apache served green tea in cups he'd found wrapped in newspaper in the hidden shrine room. Delicate porcelain painted with mountains that looked like the view outside. As he poured, the wind chimes sang softly, though the air was still. "Do you hear that?" Mariko asked, her cup trembling in her hands. "I hear it," Apache said. "I've been hearing it for 2 months now. That's your daughter's welcome song." And then he told them everything, finding the cabin, the journal, the hidden room with Kenji's war memorabilia, the money Lily had saved, the photographs with his own grandmother. He told them about the piano that played itself, the tea that appeared when needed, the origami cranes that had filled the room during the storm. He showed them the photograph of himself and Kenji in France, watched recognition dawn in his old friend's eyes. "My God," Kenji breathed. "Apache Joe, you're the one who carried me 3 miles to the medical station after I got hit by shrapnel. You saved my life first." "We saved each other," Apache said. "And now we're here, in your home, with your daughter's spirit keeping watch. The circle is complete, but the story isn't over." Mariko had been silent, gripping her teacup like an anchor. Finally, she spoke. "Show me. If my baby is here, show me." Apache led them up the narrow stairs to the piano room. As they climbed, the temperature grew warmer, and that impossible smell of cherry blossoms grew stronger. When they reached the top, Mariko gasped. The room was exactly as Lily had left it, but more so. Sheet music was arranged on the piano, her small chair pulled up to the keys, and there, translucent, but visible in the afternoon light streaming through the window, sat Lily herself, her fingers poised over the keys, as if waiting. "Mama," the spirit child said, turning with a smile that was pure joy. "Papa? You came back. I knew you would. I've been practicing, see?" Her ghostly fingers touched the keys, and Sakura filled the room, not the hesitant plunking of a 7-year-old, but the accomplished playing of someone who'd had 11 years to perfect it, 11 years of nothing but time, and love, and wait. Mariko collapsed to her knees, reaching for her daughter. Her hands passed through the small form, but Lily leaned into the embrace anyway, and for a moment, just a moment, mother and daughter occupied the same space, the same breath, the same heartbeat. "My baby," Mariko sobbed, "my beautiful girl. We tried to come back. We tried so hard, but they wouldn't let us. The government seized the property, said we'd abandoned it. We fought for years, but sure." "Mama," Lily said, her voice like wind through leaves. "I know. I heard you calling. I heard you crying. That's why I stayed, to keep it safe until you could return." Kenji stood rigid, tears running down his weathered face. "This is impossible. You're gone. We buried you. You buried my body," Lily said simply, with wisdom no 7-year-old should possess. "But love doesn't fit in boxes, Papa. Love stays where it's strongest. And I loved this place. I loved our life here. I loved you both too much to leave you with nothing but grief." Apache stood in the corner, witnessing this impossible reunion, and thought of his own children. Would they have stayed if they could? Would he have wanted them to, suspended between worlds, unable to rest? But looking at Lily's joy, at the peace on her translucent face, he understood she hadn't stayed out of inability to let go, but out of choice, out of love, out of a need to heal the wound her death had left in the world. "There's more," Apache said gently. "Things she wants you to see." He led them back to the hidden shrine room, showing them the paintings, the certificates, the evidence of their life as a family that had bridged cultures. But it was a new addition that made them gasp. A wall Apache hadn't touched, now covered with new artwork, drawings that hadn't been there before, showing Lily's spirit life in the cabin. Lily sitting with Apache while he ate soup, Lily guiding his hands on the piano keys, Lily and the ghostly forms of Apache's own children playing together in fields of light. "She hasn't been alone," Apache said softly. "The mountain is full of spirits, native children from the old days, settlers' kids who died of fever, even my own little ones. They've been her playmates, her friends. She's been teaching them her songs, and they've been teaching her theirs. Kenji turned to Apache, his expression fierce with a mixture of gratitude and pain. Why did you stay? Why did you care for our ghost child? Apache was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out the photograph he always carried, his wife Maria and their 2 children. Because I know what it is to lose everything. Because I came here to die, and your daughter gave me a reason to live. Because the man who saved my life in France deserved to have someone save something precious of his. That night they sat together in the main room, sharing a meal Apache had prepared from Mariko's recipes. The Yamadas told him about the camps, the dust, the despair. Lily's final day. Apache told them about the years of wandering after his family died, the bottle he'd crawled into and barely crawled out of, the long journey that had led him to their door. As they talked, the cabin came alive around them. Drawers opened on their own, revealing treasures the Yamadas had hidden. Mariko's mother's jewelry, Kenji's father's calligraphy brushes, photo albums they thought were lost forever. Each discovery was accompanied by Lily's delighted laughter, as if she'd been waiting to show them these gifts. She's been the keeper of memories, Mariko said wonderingly, holding her mother's pearl necklace. All this time she's been protecting our past and creating new memories, Apache added, pointing to a notebook on the shelf that hadn't been there that morning. Inside, in childish handwriting that had improved over the years, were entries dated from 1943 to the present. March 1, 1943. I'm home, but Mama and Papa aren't here. I'll wait. July 10, 1945. The war is over. They'll come now, won't they? December 25, 1950. I'm not alone anymore. Other children have found me. We play in the light. November 3, 1952. A nice man is coming. I can feel it. Someone who needs us as much as we need him. November 15, 1952. His name is Apache Joe. He knew Papa. He's teaching me Navajo songs. I'm teaching him piano. We're a good team. Today, Mama and Papa are home. The circle is complete. But I don't want to leave Apache Joe alone. Mariko looked up from the journal, her eyes meeting Apache's. She loves you. Our daughter loves you like a grandfather. And I love her like the granddaughter I never had. Apache admitted, his voice thick. Kenji stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. When he turned back, his face was set with determination. Then we have a problem. We can't take her away from you. And you can't stay here alone. There's only one solution. What do you mean? Apache asked. I mean, Kenji said, that you're family now. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Sacrifice does. Showing up does. You showed up for our daughter when we couldn't. You're staying with us. But your life is in Denver. No, Mariko interrupted. Our life was here. We've been existing in Denver, not living. We've been ghosts there, just as surely as Lily's been a ghost here. She looked around the cabin, then back at Apache. This is big enough for all of us. The main bedroom for Kenji and me. The alcove room you've been using for you. And Lily's piano room stays Lily's. Apache felt something shift in the air, like the whole mountain taking a breath. The wind chimes rang in harmony, a chord of pure celebration, and suddenly the cabin was full of light, not electric light, but something softer, warmer, like summer sunshine through leaves. Lily appeared again, more solid than before, and she was crying, the happy tears of a child whose deepest wish has been granted. Really? We can all stay together? A real family? A real family, Kenji confirmed, his voice breaking. If Apache Joe will have us. Apache looked at these people, strangers 2 hours ago, yet connected to him by threads that stretched back through war and loss and love and time. He thought of the empty years behind him, the probably few years ahead, and made his choice. On one condition, he said. We add a room. Build it proper, with traditional techniques from all our peoples. Japanese joinery, native stonework, American timber framing. A room that says what this family is, everything America should be but isn't brave enough to be yet. Yes, the Yamadas said, in unison. Lily clapped her translucent hands, and as she did, something remarkable happened. For just a moment, she became solid, completely, entirely real. 7 years old forever, but real enough to hug, to hold, to touch. Apache opened his arms, and she ran to him, her small body warm and alive against his chest. Then she pulled back and reached for her parents, and they held her, all of them crying, all of them laughing, the boundary between life and death meaningless in the face of love, this strong. "I can't stay like this, always," Lily whispered. "But sometimes when the love is strongest, I can be real. Is that enough?" "It's everything," Mariko sobbed, holding her daughter tight. Spring came early to Skeleton Ridge that year, or perhaps it only seemed that way because the cabin was so full of life. The Yamadas had returned to Denver just long enough to settle their affairs, sell their small apartment, and pack what little they'd accumulated in their years of exile. When they returned 2 weeks later, it was with a truck full of supplies and a determination to reclaim not just their home but their lives. Apache Joe had not been idle in their absence. With strength he hadn't felt in years, strength that seemed to flow from the very walls of the cabin, he'd cleared ground for the new addition they'd discussed. But he hadn't done it alone. Each morning he'd found tools laid out where he needed them, markers showing where to dig, even small piles of suitable stones gathered from the mountainside. Lily's presence was constant, sometimes visible, always felt. "She's excited," Apache explained when the Yamadas returned, finding him working on the foundation. "She says she's never seen a room being born before." Mariko smiled, tears never far from her eyes these days. But they were healing tears now, not the bitter ones of loss. She was always like that, always wanted to be part of making things. The work began in earnest. Kenji, it turned out, had learned traditional Japanese carpentry from his father, while Apache knew the ancient Navajo techniques of building with earth and stone. Mariko contributed her artist's eye for harmony and balance. And Lily was everywhere, her child's laughter the music they worked to. On the 3rd day of construction, they had visitors. Apache heard them first, voices speaking in Navajo, coming up the trail. He straightened from his work, back protesting to see 3 figures approaching, an elderly woman, a middle-aged man, and a young boy perhaps 10 years old. The woman raised her hand in greeting, "Yazzie, Joseph Yazzie." Apache's breath caught. "Yazzie, Eleanor Begay." He knew her. She was his cousin, from his grandmother's clan. He hadn't seen her in 20 years. "We heard you were alive," Eleanor said, her eyes taking in the cabin, the Yamadas, the construction. "We heard you found something up here." "I found family," Apache said simply. Eleanor's gaze sharpened, and Apache knew she was seeing more than just the physical world. Medicine ran strong in their family, the ability to perceive what others couldn't. Her eyes widened slightly, and he knew she could see Lily, probably see all the spirits that had made this place home. "Ah," she said softly. "The child who bridges worlds. We felt her in our ceremonies. She's been calling out, hasn't she? Calling for unity." Kenji and Mariko had approached, uncertain but welcoming. Apache made introductions, watched his worlds collide and merge. Eleanor's son, Robert, was a contractor in Flagstaff. Her grandson, Timothy, stared with wide eyes at something just past Mariko's shoulder. At Lily, Apache realized, who had materialized enough for sensitive children to see. "Can you see her?" Mariko asked Timothy gently. The boy nodded, shy but not frightened. "She's pretty. She looks like my sister, but see-through. Would you like to meet her properly?" Mariko asked. What followed was extraordinary. Timothy and Lily, one living, one dead, became instant friends. They couldn't touch in the traditional sense, but they could play. Timothy would stack stones and Lily would somehow move them, creating patterns. They sang together, Timothy teaching Lily Navajo songs while she taught him Japanese playground rhyme. "This is why we were brought here," Eleanor said, watching the children. "Your grandmother, Standing Crane. She knew this day would come. She told me before she died that the threads would weave together at the mountain where the sun sets through the eye of the needle." Apache looked up at the cliff face and for the first time noticed it, a hole in the rock formation that the setting sun would shine through, creating a perfect circle of light. How had he not seen it before? She knew about the Yamadas. Eleanor continued. She helped them hide their treasures, taught their girl the old songs. She said one day, when the world had broken enough, this place would show how to heal. Robert stepped forward. "I brought my crew's tools. We'd like to help with the building, if you'll have us. No charge. This is ceremony, not commerce." And so the building became a community effort. Robert's crew, a mix of Navajo, Hopi, and Mexican workers, arrived the next day. Word spread in ways that Apache couldn't track, and soon others came. The Japanese grocer from Flagstaff brought his son. The librarian, Mrs. Adelaide, organized the church ladies to bring food. Even Thomas Hartley showed up, shamefaced but determined to help, to make amends for his family's attempt to profit from the Yamadas' loss. The room they built was unlike anything any of them had seen before. Japanese post and beam construction met Navajo stonework. Mexican adobe techniques merged with American timber framing. The walls were oriented to catch the sunrise and sunset, with windows placed according to both feng shui principles and native sacred geometry. It was, as young Timothy said, with the clarity of children, a room for everybody. During the construction, stories emerged. Each person who came to help seemed to have a connection they hadn't known about. The Mexican workers spoke of grandparents who'd hidden native families during the cavalry raids. Mrs. Adelaide revealed that her father had tried to prevent the Japanese families from being taken, had been threatened with arrest himself. Thomas Hartley admitted his uncle had bought several Japanese properties for pennies on the dollar, and the guilt had driven him to drink and madness. "We've all been broken by the breaking," Eleanor observed one evening, as they shared dinner outside, the spring air warm and full of the scent of desert flowers. "But look, we're learning to heal by healing together." Lily was everywhere during these gatherings, more visible each day. She especially loved the Mexican workers' children, who could all see her clearly and included her in their games without question. She would manifest just enough to hold hands during their circle games, her laughter mixing with theirs until you couldn't tell which child was living and which was not. One evening, as the room neared completion, something extraordinary happened. They were having a celebration dinner, Japanese curry, mild for the children, Navajo fry bread, Mexican tamales, and good old American apple pie from Mrs. Adelaide. The sun was setting through the eye of the needle in the cliff, sending a perfect beam of light into the new room through its specially placed window. Lily appeared in the beam of light, but she wasn't alone. Other spirits materialized, Apache's children, standing shy but smiling beside her. An old Japanese man who Kenji gasped and identified as his father. A Navajo woman who Eleanor recognized as Standing Crane herself. Mexican and Anglo children from the town's past epidemics, all the lost, all the grieved for, all the beloved dead, standing together in the light. "They've always been here," Eleanor said softly, "waiting for us to see that death doesn't end love, that borders don't define family, that loss can become gift if we let it." Standing Crane's spirit moved forward, and when she spoke, everyone could hear her, regardless of what language they understood. "This place is sacred not because gods touched it, but because humans chose to love here, despite having every reason to hate. You've built more than a room. You've built a bridge between worlds, not just between living and dead, but between peoples who were told they were enemies." Apache Joe felt his children's presence like warm hands in his son Joseph Jr. whispered, "We're proud of you, Dad. You found a way to live again, his daughter Maria added. We were never far. Love doesn't know distance. The gathering lasted until dawn, the living and the dead celebrating together, the new room blessing itself with joy. As the sun rose, the spirits began to fade, but not with sadness, with promise. They would return. This place would always be a threshold, a meeting ground, a reminder that love transcends every boundary humans create. When the last spirit faded, Lily remained, as she always did now, the guardian and heart of this strange, beautiful household. She looked at the assembled crowd, native, Japanese, Mexican, Anglo, all united in this moment, and said with a wisdom beyond her eternal 7 years, this is what heaven looks like. Not separate places for separate peoples, but everyone together, sharing their songs. The room was finished the next week. They called it the Harmony Room, and it became many things. A place for Kenji to practice traditional Japanese tea ceremony, for Apache to work on traditional Navajo weaving that Eleanor was teaching him, for Mariko to paint her impossible landscapes where cherry blossoms and cacti coexisted. It was where Timothy came for lessons from Lily. He was learning piano, she was learning to manifest more strongly through his living energy, a symbiosis that helped both. But perhaps most importantly, it became a place of pilgrimage. Word spread in quiet ways about the cabin on Skeleton Ridge, where death wasn't final, where cultures met and merged, where broken things were made whole. People came carrying their grief, their guilt, their deepest wound, and somehow in that room built by many hands, in the presence of a ghost child who radiated pure love, they found healing. A year passed. The Yamadas and Apache Joe had settled into a routine that felt both new and ancient. Mornings began with Kenji's Buddhist prayers, mixing with Apache's Navajo dawn songs. Mariko cooked meals that defied category: sukiyaki with cornbread, green chill tempura, fry bread with miso butter. Apache taught Kenji traditional tracking and hunting. Kenji taught Apache the meditation techniques that had kept him sane in the camps. And through it all, Lily grew not older, never older, but deeper, stronger, more present. She could manifest for hours now, could even eat small amounts of food. Where it went, no one asked. She attended Timothy's school play as his cousin from out of town, and no one questioned the quiet girl in the old-fashioned dress. She was becoming something new, not alive, not dead, but something in between, something that perhaps the world needed. The trouble started on a humid July morning in 1953, 15 months after the Yamadas had returned. Apache Joe was teaching Timothy how to read weather patterns in the clouds when he saw the black government sedan struggling up the mountain road. His stomach tightened. He'd seen such cars before, during the roundups, during the relocations. They never brought good news. Timothy, he said quietly, run to the cabin. Tell Mr. Kenji we have official visitors. The boy took off like a jackrabbit, his feet sure on the rocky path. Apache Joe stood waiting, his hand instinctively going to the medicine pouch Eleanor had given him, filled with corn pollen and sacred stones. Whatever was coming, he would meet it standing. 2 men emerged from the sedan, both wearing dark suits, despite the heat, both carrying briefcases. The older one, gray-haired with cold blue eyes, looked at Apache with the kind of dismissive glance he'd seen all his life. The younger one, Japanese-American, seemed uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if expecting ambush. Mr. Yazzie, the older man said, I'm Harold Richardson from the Bureau of Land Management. This is James Tanaka from the War Relocation Authority, or what's left of it. The war's been over 8 years, Apache said evenly. What does the WRA want now? We're here about the property, Richardson said, pulling out documents. This cabin and the surrounding land was seized by the government in 1942 as abandoned property. The sale to Thomas Hartley's uncle was illegal, which means your purchase was also illegal. Apache felt rage rise in his chest. hot and familiar. The Yamadas didn't abandon anything. They were forced out at gunpoint. That's a matter of interpretation, Richardson said coolly. The fact remains, this is government property. You and anyone else residing here need to vacate within 30 days. No. The word came from behind Apache. Kenji stood there, Mariko beside him, both radiating a quiet strength. But it was what Richardson and Tanaka couldn't see that made Apache almost smile. Lily stood between her parents, her small face fierce with determination, and she was more solid than he'd ever seen her in daylight. Yamada, Tanaka said, speaking for the first time, his voice pained. I understand your feelings, but do you? Kenji interrupted. Do you understand what it's like to be declared an enemy in your own country? To watch your child die in a concentration camp on American soil? To return to find everything you built stolen and sold? Tanaka flinched. My family was in Minidoka. I do understand. But the law was wrong, Mariko said quietly. And you know it, Mr. Tanaka. I can see it in your eyes. You're here against your will, aren't you? Tanaka's composure cracked slightly. I'm here to try to resolve this peacefully. The government wants to develop this area. There's uranium in these hills. They'll take it by force if necessary. I'm trying to prevent that. Uranium, Apache laughed bitterly. Always something. Gold, silver, uranium. You take and take until there's nothing left but poisoned earth. Richardson's face hardened. You have 30 days. If you're not gone, federal marshals will remove you. He turned to go, then stopped. And don't think about fighting this in court. No judge in Arizona is going to side with a Japanese family and an Indian against the federal government. As they walked back to their car, the wind suddenly picked up, not naturally, but with purpose. Papers flew from Richardson's briefcase, scattering across the mountainside. The car's engine, fine moments before, wouldn't start, and in the swirling dust, for just a moment Richardson saw something that made him go pale. Dozens of figures, translucent but unmistakable, surrounding his car. Native warriors, Japanese farmers, Mexican settlers, Anglo pioneers, all staring at him with eyes that held centuries of judgment. What in hell? Richardson gasped. Nothing in hell, Apache said calmly, but plenty in these hills. This land remembers every drop of blood spilled on it, every tear shed, every injustice done. You might want to leave now while it's still willing to let you. The car started suddenly, and Richardson drove off fast enough to leave ruts in the dirt road. But Tanaka lingered for a moment at the window, looking back. Fight this, he said quietly. Find a way. I'll delay things as long as I can. Then louder, for Richardson's benefit. 30 days, no extensions. After they left, the family gathered in the Harmony Room. Timothy had been hiding behind the door, and his mother, Eleanor, had arrived, somehow knowing she was needed. We can't fight the federal government, Kenji said heavily. They have all the power. No, Eleanor said firmly. They have force. Power is different. Power comes from the earth, from the ancestors, from righteousness. And this place has power they can't imagine. What are you suggesting? Mariko asked. Eleanor smiled, and it was the smile of her grandmother, of Standing Crane, of all the medicine women who had come before. I'm suggesting we remind them that there are laws older than their papers. Timothy, go fetch your grandfather. Tell him to bring the tribal council. Apache, we need your veteran friends from the VFW. Mariko, can you contact the Japanese American Citizens League? What are you planning? Apache asked. Not war, Eleanor said. Witness. They want to take this land in darkness, in silence, the way they've always taken. But what if the whole world is watching when they come? The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Letters were sent, phone calls made. Mrs. Adelaide used her connections to contact newspapers. The story spread. Decorated war veterans, one native, one Japanese American, fighting to keep a home that straddled two internment histories. The cruel irony wasn't lost on anyone. Men who had fought for America being told they had no right to American land. But it was Lily who provided the most unexpected help. One night, As Apache sat at the table writing letters, she materialized beside him, more solid than ever. "Grandfather Apache," she said. She had taken to calling him that, and it never failed to warm his heart. "I've been thinking, the government men are afraid of something." "Uranium money," Apache said. "No, something else." When Mr. Richardson saw the spirits, he wasn't just scared, he recognized someone. One of the Anglo spirits, he knew him. Apache set down his pen. "Who was it?" "I don't know, but I can find out. The spirits talk to each other. They remember everything." She paused. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Always, little one. I'm getting stronger, not just here, but everywhere. I can go places now, see things. Last night I went to Mr. Richardson's house. He has a photograph on his desk, him and another man in front of this cabin, from maybe 20 years ago." Apache's mind raced. 20 years ago would be the early 30s, during the Depression. The spirits say there were murders here then. Men killed for mining claims. Bodies never found. Lily's face was serious beyond her years. "The spirits say Richardson's partner was one of the killers. The spirits say Richardson knows where the bodies are buried." Apache felt a chill despite the warm night. "Can the spirits prove it?" Lily smiled, and it was not entirely a child's smile. "Grandfather, the dead never lie, and they never forget." The 30 days were almost up when everything came together. The yard in front of the cabin was full of people, Navajo from the reservation, Japanese Americans from Phoenix and Los Angeles, Mexican-American families from town, Anglo veterans from the VFW, and reporters from as far away as New York. Miss Adelaide had outdone herself, turning it into a national story. Richardson arrived with federal marshals, but also with Tanaka, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. They faced the crowd, Richardson's face tight with anger. "This is federal property," he announced. "Anyone who doesn't disperse will be arrested." "Before you do that," a new voice said, "you might want to hear what we have to say." It was Robert Begay, Eleanor's son, but he wasn't alone. With him were tribal police and, surprisingly, the county sheriff. "Sheriff Morrison," Richardson said, confused. "This is federal jurisdiction." "Not entirely," the sheriff said. "Not when it comes to murder." Richardson went very still. Robert continued. "We found 3 bodies at the bottom of the old mine shaft, half a mile from here. Been there about 20 years, according to the coroner. And funny thing, one of them was carrying this." He held up a tarnished pocket watch. Even from a distance, Apache could see the inscription, could see Richardson's face go white. "That's your daddy's watch, isn't it, Mr. Richardson?" the sheriff said. "The one you reported stolen in 1933, same time those 3 prospectors went missing. Same time you and your daddy suddenly had enough money to buy into that mining company." "This is ridiculous," Richardson stammered. "You can't prove anything." "No." Eleanor stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried despite her soft tone. "The earth remembers, Mr. Richardson. The dead remember. Your father killed those men for their claims. You helped hide the bodies. And you've been trying to get this land ever since, to make sure they were never found. That's insane. You have no proof." "We have the bodies," the sheriff said. "We have the watch. We have mineral rights documents with suspicious signatures. And we have witnesses." "What witnesses? It was 20 years ago." Eleanor smiled. "The kind that don't age, Mr. Richardson. The kind that have been waiting for justice." As if on cue, the wind rose, and in the dust and light, figures appeared. The 3 murdered prospectors, clear as day to everyone present. They stood pointing at Richardson, their mouths moving in silent accusation. Richardson screamed, fell to his knees, and began confessing, words pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. His father's greed, the murders, the cover-up, his attempts to get the land to hide the evidence forever. The marshals arrested him on the spot. Tanaka stood in the chaos, looking at the cabin, at the Yamadas, at Apache Joe. Finally he spoke. "I'll file a report saying the land claim was fraudulent. The property belongs to the Yamadas, legally and morally. I'll make sure of it. Why? Kenji asked. Tanaka's eyes were wet. Because I've been a coward. Because I've been part of the machine that destroyed us. Because that little girl, he pointed to where Lily stood, visible to him now, smiling forgiveness, deserved better from all of us. The crowd dispersed slowly, but many stayed for an impromptu celebration. Food appeared from nowhere. Everyone had brought something. Music filled the air. Navajo drums, Japanese flutes, Mexican guitars, all blending into something beautiful and impossible. That night, as the family sat in the harmony room, Lily more solid than ever before, Mariko asked the question they were all thinking. What happens now? Now, Apache said, looking at his family, the one he'd never expected, the one that had saved him. We live. We teach. We show the world that borders are lies, that love crosses every boundary, that family is what you choose it to be. And I, Lily asked, what happens to me? Apache pulled her close, this ghost child who had become more real to him than most living people. You stay as long as you want, little one. This is your home. We are your family. Death doesn't change that. Lily smiled and began to fade, not disappearing, just returning to her usual translucent state. I think I'll stay forever then. If that's okay, more than okay, Kenji said, tears on his face. Perfect. 5 years passed like water through fingers, precious, impossible to hold, but leaving everything changed in its wake. The cabin on Skeleton Ridge had become something of a legend, a place where the impossible became every day. People came from across the country now, drawn by stories of the ghost girl who taught piano to living children, of the place where cultures met and melded, of the strange family that had formed from loss and love. Apache Joe was 73 now, his body finally beginning to fail in ways that even Lily's mysterious influence couldn't prevent. His hands shook when he tried to play piano. His breath came short on the stairs to Lily's room. And sometimes he forgot things, what day it was, where he'd put his glasses. But his spirit remained strong, held up by the love that filled every corner of the cabin. It was October 1958 when the first real sign came. Apache woke in the night to find his wife Maria standing by his bed. Not a memory, not a dream, but Maria herself, as clear as she'd been in life. It's almost time, Joseph, she said gently. I know, he replied, not afraid, just sad, but I'm not ready to leave them. You won't be leaving, Maria said, sitting on the bed, her weight real enough to shift the mattress. You'll just be changing form, like Lily did. This place, it holds souls that are bound by love. You've woven yourself so deeply into its fabric that death won't separate you from it. Will I be like her, a ghost? Maria smiled. You'll be whatever they need you to be. That's what love does. It shapes itself to fill the spaces that need filling. When Apache woke the next morning, he knew it was true. He could feel the thinness of the veil, how close he was to crossing. But he had things to do first, things to say. He found Kenji in the garden they'd planted together, working the soil with the patience of someone who'd learned that good things take time. Kenny, Apache said, using the old nickname from the war, I need you to know something. Kenji looked up, saw something in Apache's face, and set down his tools. Joe, I'm dying, Apache said simply. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Weeks, maybe a month or two. Kenji's face crumpled. No, we'll get doctors. No doctors, Apache said firmly. I've lived my life. I've found my peace. I've had 5 years I never expected, with a family I never dreamed of. Let me go the way I want here, with dignity, with my family around me. Does Mariko know? Does Lily? They know, maybe not consciously, but they know. Lily's been more solid lately, have you noticed? She's gathering strength to help me cross. Kenji was crying now, this strong man who'd survived war and internment. You saved us, Joe. When we came back here, we were broken. You made us whole. No, Apache said, pulling his friend into an embrace. We saved each other. That's what family does. Over the next weeks, Apache set his affairs in order, but not in the usual way. He didn't write a will. He had nothing to leave but love, and that was already given. Instead, he spent time with each person who mattered, creating memories that would outlast his body. With Timothy now 15 and tall for his age, he hiked to all the sacred spots his grandmother had shown him, teaching the boy the songs that went with each place. "Why are you teaching me all this now, Uncle Joe?" Timothy asked, using the name he'd called Apache since childhood. "Because someone needs to remember," Apache said. "And you have the gift. You can see both worlds. You'll be the bridge when I'm gone." "You're not going anywhere," Timothy said fiercely, but his eyes said he knew better. With Eleanor, he spoke of family history, of stories that needed to be preserved. She recorded everything, her tape recorder capturing not just his words, but the wisdom of generations. With Mariko, he painted. She'd been teaching him, and though his hands shook, together they created a massive mural on the wall of the Harmony Room. The mountain, the cabin, and all the spirits that dwelt there, visible and invisible, past and present and future, all together in one impossible, beautiful moment. "It's perfect," Mariko said when they finished, both of them covered in paint. "It's true," Apache corrected. "That's better than perfect." But it was with Lily that he spent the most time. She was with him constantly now, as solid as any living child, her presence a comfort and a joy. They would sit for hours at the piano, playing duets, his fumbling bass notes supporting her increasingly complex melodies. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Lily asked him the question he'd been waiting for. "Grandfather Apache, are you afraid?" "No, little one. Are you?" She shook her head. "I was when I was dying in the camp. But then I came here, and I understood dying isn't ending, it's just changing. Like water becoming snow, then melting to become water again. That's very wise for a 7-year-old. She laughed, that bright sound that had first drawn him to stay. "I'm not really 7 anymore. I'm 7 and 70 and eternal all at once. Time doesn't work the same when you're dead." She paused. "Will you stay with me after?" "If I can," Apache promised. "If you'll have me forever," she said simply. November came with unusual warmth, what Apache's grandmother had called spirit summer, those last warm days before winter, when the veil was thinnest. Apache knew his time was close. He could see the other spirits constantly now, not just Lily, but his children, his wife, standing crane, even old friends from the war. They weren't calling him, they were simply waiting, patient as mountains. On November 15th, exactly 6 years after he'd first found the cabin, Apache Joe gathered everyone in the Harmony Room. The Bigay clan was there, Miss Adelaide, some of the Japanese families from Phoenix, the Mexican workers who'd helped build the room, even James Tanaka, who'd become a friend and advocate over the years. But most importantly, his family was there. Kenji, Mariko, and Lily, solid as life, holding his hand. "I want to tell you all something," Apache said, his voice still strong despite his body's weakness. 6 years ago, I came here to die. I had 47 cents, no hope, and a heart so broken I thought it would never beat properly again. I found instead a reason to live this impossible family, this impossible place, where love refuses to recognize the boundaries we build." He looked at each face, memorizing them, though he suspected he wouldn't need memories where he was going. "The world tells us to separate, by race, by religion, by the border between life and death. But here in this cabin built into a mountain that's older than human memory, we've proven that's all illusion. We are one family, one people, one continuous story of love and loss and redemption." He turned to Lily. "Play for me, granddaughter. Play the song you've been practicing." Lily moved to the piano and began to play, not Sakura, not any song anyone recognized, but something new. It was all their cultures woven together, Navajo rhythm, Japanese melody, Mexican harmony, American blues and hope. It was the sound of barriers breaking, of wounds healing, of love transcending death itself. As she played, the room filled with light, not electric, not fire, but the light of souls touching. Everyone could see them now, all the spirits, all the connections between the living and the dead made visible. The room was crowded with grandparents and children, with ancestors from every culture, all swaying to Lily's impossible music. Apache Joe stood, his body light as air, and walked to the piano. He placed his hands on the keys beside Lily's and found he could play, not with the fumbling of his recent attempts, but with skill he'd never possessed in life. Together, they played the last verse, and as they did, Apache felt himself changing. He looked down and saw his body still sitting in the chair, Mariko holding one hand, Kenji the other. But he was also standing, young and strong, transparent but real. His children stood beside him, his wife behind him, all of them glowing with that same impossible light. "Oh," he said softly, understanding filling him. "Oh, I see. He wasn't dying. He was transforming." The cabin, this sacred place that had held so much love and loss, was keeping him just as it had kept Lily. He would be its guardian now too, its bridge between worlds. The music reached a crescendo, and as it did, Apache Joe Yazzie took his last breath in his body, and his first breath as something new. There was no sadness in the room, only wonder, as everyone watched him stand up from his body, young and strong, and take his place beside Lily at the piano. "I'm still here," he said, and everyone could hear him, just different. Lily threw her arms around him, solid ghost embracing new spirit, and laughed with pure joy. "Now we can play duets forever." "And we will," Apache promised. Then he looked at Kenji and Mariko, who were crying but smiling. "I'm not leaving you. This is my home. You are my family. Death doesn't change that." "We know," Mariko whispered. "We love you, Father Joe." Father, they'd never called him that before. Apache's spirit glowed brighter. The funeral 3 days later was unlike any the town had seen. They buried Apache's body in the small cemetery on the ridge, beside a marker they'd placed for Lily years before. But it wasn't a sad occasion. How could it be when Apache himself attended, visible to some, felt by all, his laughter mixing with the wind? Timothy Begay, now 25 and a law school graduate, stood at the entrance to the cabin on Skeleton Ridge, his wife Sarah beside him, their newborn daughter in his arms. The years had changed him from a shy boy into a confident man, but this place still filled him with the same wonder it had when he was 10. "Are you sure they're still here?" Sarah asked softly. She was Lakota, from South Dakota, and while she believed in spirits, she'd never experienced anything like what Timothy had described. "They're here," Timothy said with certainty. "They're always here." As if in response, wind chimes throughout the cabin began to sing, though the air was still. The door opened on its own, and there stood Mariko, now 70, but still graceful, her hair silver but her eyes bright with joy. "Timothy, you came. I promised I would, Aunt Marie. I wanted you to meet Emma, and I wanted Emma to meet everyone." Mariko's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the baby. "She's beautiful. Bring her in. Bring her in. Chenji, Timothy's here with the baby." The cabin had changed over the years, expanded with careful additions that honored the original structure. It had become a retreat center of sorts, a place where people came to heal, to learn, to experience the impossible. Chenji and Mariko ran it with the help of the Bagay family and a rotating group of volunteers from all backgrounds. They called it the Harmony House, and it had become famous in certain circles, those who understood that healing sometimes required believing in things that couldn't be scientifically proven. As Timothy entered the main room, he felt them immediately, Lily and Apache Joe, as present as ever. To his trained eyes, years of seeing them had honed his perception. They were sitting in their favorite spots, Apache in the rocking chair, Lily at the small table where she liked to draw. Both were smiling. "Hello, Grandfather Apache." "Hello, Lily," Timothy said naturally. Sarah gasped. She could see them too, faint, but unmistakable, an old native man and a young Japanese girl, both translucent but somehow more real than anything else in the room. "I told you," Timothy said gently to his wife. "This place makes the impossible normal." Baby Emma, barely a month old, turned her head toward the spirits and laughed, a sound too knowing for an infant, too joyful for the mundane world. "She sees us perfectly," Lily said, her voice like wind chimes. "Babies always do before the world teaches them not to." Over the next days, Timothy witnessed how the Harmony House had evolved. There were scheduled gatherings now, healing circles that combined native, Japanese and Mexican traditions. Kenji taught meditation while incorporating Navajo breathing techniques. Apache had shown him. Mariko led art therapy sessions where people painted their grief and watched it transform into beauty. And always, Lily and Apache were there, sometimes visible, always felt, helping in ways that defied explanation. One evening, a new family arrived. Vietnamese refugees, fresh from the war that was tearing their country apart. They'd heard about this place through the underground network of healing spaces, heard it was somewhere that understood displacement, loss, the grief of being caught between worlds. The family, parents and 3 children, stood uncertainly at the door, carrying their meager possessions, eyes haunted by things they'd seen. "Welcome," Kenji said in careful Vietnamese he'd been learning. "You're safe here." The youngest child, a girl of perhaps 6, suddenly pointed at the corner of the room. "Look, Mama, a girl, she's glowing." Lily had materialized more solid than Timothy had seen her in years, and she was walking toward the Vietnamese family with her hands outstretched. She spoke, and somehow impossibly, it was in Vietnamese, a language she'd never known in life, but had learned in death from the growing number of war spirits, finding their way to this sanctuary. "Hello," Lily said to the little girl. "My name is Lily. Would you like to see my piano?" That night, Timothy watched as the cabin worked its magic once again. The Vietnamese family, traumatized and displaced, began to relax as they realized they were in a place that understood. Kenji shared his own internment story. Mariko cooked a meal that somehow blended Vietnamese and Japanese flavors perfectly, and Apache's spirit taught the children native games that needed no common language. "This is what America should be," Rasi whispered to Timothy, holding Emma close. "This is what it could be, if we let it." "This is what it is," Timothy corrected. "Here, in this little corner, and it's spreading." He was right. Over the years, people who'd been healed at Harmony House had gone on to create similar spaces, places where cultures met and mingled, where the boundary between life and death was understood to be permeable, where love was recognized as the only force that truly mattered. 3 days into their visit, something extraordinary happened. Timothy was in the Harmony Room teaching a class on indigenous law to a mixed group of visitors when Apache Joe materialized more solidly than ever before. "Timothy," Apache said, his voice clear as if he were alive, "it's time." "Time for what, grandfather?" "Time to tell the whole story, time to write it down. You're the only one who can. You've seen it all from the beginning. You have the words, the education, the understanding. Write our story, but more than that, write the instruction manual for how to build these bridges everywhere." Timothy understood. He'd been feeling the pull to document everything, to create something that would last beyond all of them. "I'll need help. I'll need everyone's story." "You'll have them," Apache promised. "The living and the dead will tell you their truths. Start tonight." That evening, Timothy set up his typewriter in the Harmony Room. As he began to type, the room filled with spirits, not just Lily and Apache, but dozens of others who'd been touched by this place. They whispered their stories, their connections, their moments of transformation. Kenji and Mariko sat with him, adding their own memories, their own understanding of how grief became joy, how loss became gift. The Vietnamese family watched in wonder as the room filled with light, each spirit a small sun, all of them together creating a constellation of love that transcended every human division. "Is this real?" the Vietnamese father asked in broken English. As real as suffering, Kenji answered. As real as love. As real as the choice we make every day to see each other as family or as strangers. Days turned to weeks. Timothy wrote while Sarah cared for Emma, who seemed to thrive in the cabin's atmosphere. The baby would lie quietly for hours, watching Lily play piano, listening to Apache tell stories only she could fully hear. One morning, Mariko made an announcement at breakfast. Kenji and I have been discussing something with the Tribal Council and with the Japanese American Citizens League. We want to turn this place into a formal foundation, the Harmony House Foundation. A place that will continue long after we're gone. We're donating the land and buildings, Kenji added. Timothy, we want you to be the first director. You understand both worlds, the seen and the unseen. You can keep the bridge open. Timothy was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say. Say yes, Apache's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Say yes to continuing what we started. Say yes to proving that love is stronger than death, that family is bigger than blood, that America's strength lies not in its divisions, but in its impossible unity. Yes, Timothy said. Of course, yes. That night, there was a celebration unlike any before. The house was full, the Vietnamese family, several Mexican-American families from town, native relatives from 3 different tribes, Japanese-American families who'd been coming for years, and even a group of young hippies who'd heard about the place through the counterculture network. Lily played piano, a concert that lasted hours, music that seemed to pull from every tradition, every culture, every moment of joy and sorrow that had ever existed. Apache told stories that made people laugh and cry simultaneously. Other spirits appeared. Standing Crane, Apache's children, Kenji's father, ancestors from every line, all mingling, all celebrating. At midnight, as the celebration reached its peak, something shifted. The veil between worlds didn't just thin, it disappeared entirely. For one perfect moment, everyone in the room could see everything. All the spirits, all the connections between people, the threads of love that connected every soul to every other soul. In that moment, little Emma, the baby who'd been watching everything with ancient eyes, spoke her first words. Impossible for a child so young, but nothing was impossible here. Home, she said clearly. All home. And they were in that cabin built into a cliff, where a poor Apache had found shelter and a Japanese family had found healing, where death was just another room in the house and love was the only currency that mattered. They were all home. Emma Begay Chen, now 50 years old and a renowned anthropologist, stood before the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Paris. Behind her, a presentation showed images of the Harmony House, not just the original cabin, but the entire complex that had grown around it, a place that had become a global model for cultural healing and integration. The Harmony House, she said, her voice carrying her father, Timothy's strength and her mother, Sarah's grace, began with a 50-cent purchase by a homeless Native American veteran. It became a refuge for a Japanese-American family returning from internment. It evolved into proof that the boundaries we create between races, between nations, between life and death, are illusions we choose to maintain. She clicked to the next slide, a photograph from 1968, showing the original celebration, though the spirits were only visible as mysterious lights in the image. My father, Timothy Begay, wrote in his chronicle, "This place exists at the intersection of the possible and the impossible. It is where America's highest ideals meet its deepest failures and transform them into healing." For 70 years, the Harmony House has been a place where veterans find peace, where refugees find home, where the grieving find comfort, and where all people find family. The committee members leaned forward, captivated. But more than that, Emma continued, it is proof that places can hold memory, that love transcends death, and that the stories we tell about division are less true than the stories we live about unity. I stand before you today not just as an academic, but as someone who was raised by ghosts and the living alike, who learned piano from a girl who died in 1943, who was taught traditional songs by a man who passed in 1958, but never left. She paused, letting the impossibility of her words sink in. You may choose not to believe the supernatural elements of the Harmony House's story. That's your right, but you cannot deny its impact. The thousands of lives healed, the hundreds of similar centers it has inspired globally, the model it provides for a world desperately in need of bridges rather than walls. The vote was unanimous. The Harmony House was designated a World Heritage Site, recognized not for its architecture or its age, but for its contribution to human understanding and healing. That evening, Emma returned to Skeleton Ridge. The original cabin was now a museum, carefully preserved, but still alive with presence. The newer buildings housed the retreat center, the training facility for cultural healers, the archive of stories Timothy had started and others had continued. She entered the original cabin alone, as she always did when she returned. They were waiting for her. Lily, eternal child, eternal teacher, Apache Joe, guardian and grandfather to all who needed one. And now others too, Kenji and Mariko, who had joined them in the 1990s, Timothy and Sarah, who had crossed over 5 years ago. We're proud of you, Apache said. As solid as memory, as real as love. You did it, Lily added, clapping her translucent hands. You made the whole world see what we always knew, that love is the only truth that matters. Emma sat at the old piano, the one Lily had never gotten to play at her recital in 1942, and began the song that had become the Harmony House anthem, a melody that wove together every culture that had touched this place, every soul that had found healing here. As she played, the spirits joined in, not just the familiar ones, but hundreds now, souls from every war, every displacement, every loss, that had found peace in this impossible place. The cabin glowed with their light, visible even from the town below, a beacon that said, "Here is home, here is family, here is proof that death is not the end, that difference is not division, that love is the force that binds the universe." The last note hung in the air like a promise, like a prayer, like the truth that had always been waiting to be discovered. We are all one family, separated only by the stories we tell ourselves, united by the love we choose to live. In the corner of the room, barely visible, even to Emma's trained eyes, a new spirit materialized, a Syrian refugee child who had died in the Mediterranean, drawn to this place by the same force that had drawn all the others. The promise that somewhere, somehow, love survived everything, even death. Lily walked over to the new spirit, her hand extended, speaking in Arabic. She had learned from the growing circle of souls that called this place home. "Welcome," she said. "You're safe now, your family." And the circle continued, ever widening, ever welcoming, proof that in the end, love is the only government, the only religion, the only truth that matters. The 50-cent cabin had become priceless, the poor Apache had become eternally rich, the displaced family had found eternal home, and death, that final border, had been revealed as just another illusion that love could overcome.